Hey there everyone and welcome to some Tower Hero level guides. In this video we're going to look at the special dungeons levels 3 to 6. So these are, the levels 4 to 6 are very different from level 3, so I'm going to kind of talk more generally when we get to that point. Let's just talk about level 3 for now. So level 3 is an interesting mixture of things, like because these are for special heroes, special heroes do different things, and it's kind of like you got some spikes here, you got some stun traps, enemies are unblockable, it's weird stuff. So for this, it's basically a case of having taking advantage of those spikes on the left-hand side. They're going to wreck a lot of enemies that go through there. So you can just kind of let the enemies feed through there, kill off what comes through, and have some ranged attackers to kind of chip away at enemies as they're passing through as well. The heroes which I use for this, well, we're going to see them in a second. They're all low-level heroes, all Evo 1, 2 to 4 stars, that kind of stuff. Because, we can show this with low-level heroes. This isn't the ideal setup. I wanted to try out Jura because she's a terrible 3-star, but I still used her in this. And, yeah, you could do a better setup if you want. So this beginning bit, the small enemies, they're all going to get killed off by the spikes, so you don't have to worry about them at all. The big enemy, though, I put down some range attackers to kind of chip away at it, and then we can just, let it very slowly come over to then get killed off by the melee attackers. The setup I'll do on the right-hand side with the melee attackers is I'll have, as you can see, these two facing in towards one, and then I'm going to have, in that third spot facing left, it's just going to be a kind of kill zone there with the range attackers hitting all the enemies as they're coming through, spawning. The main ones to worry about are the big enemies, because the small enemies, like as you can see, all the ones going on the left-hand side are basically dying off automatically, so you need to have enough damage to kill these big enemies. You can see one almost got through just now, well, a few seconds ago. And then this final wave, you can see a lot of big enemies coming through. So these are the big problem. And this is where I'd recommend using the stun trap. So I often don't take too much advantage of maps with stuff. But here, that stun trap there is very, very useful because it takes off a massive amount of health of all those. Oh yeah, I should say the spike traps, because this is beta testing, as bugs. You can't see the spikes actually going off, but the spikes were going off throughout this level. And yeah, so these big enemies, that's the tough bit. You've got to have enough to take them down. You could perhaps sell on the left-hand side to place some more range heroes down on the right-hand side to finish them off if you need to. So special 4 going through to 6. What we have is the enemies are enraged, which means that they slowly lose their health over time. It's not a huge factor in things, but it does mean if you can place your heroes later on their path of where they're going, then you have to deal less damage to kill the enemies off. The main problem though is it means that the enemies do a lot more damage. So these enemies are actually really quite tough going through level 4, 5 and 6. So either your heroes have to be kind of over leveled for the battle, or you've got to try and do some sort of slightly tricky type things, like using range heroes and enemies that can attack from afar, that kind of stuff. So you can see in this setup I've got Li Zhen on the left-hand side, who's very nicely attacking up at that enemy at the top before the enemy gets to it. These big guys are a big problem. They do a lot of damage. I don't think at this level in particular is that much of a problem with it, but the next level is a lot harder with it. So yeah, you've got to be careful with it. Also, I would say the main thing which you can do about it is use the elemental advantage heroes. So here we have nature enemies. If you can fill your team with fire heroes, you're going to have a much better time. And this particular battle, the two MVPs are absolutely Scarlet and Balfagor. They'll do an amazing job of this. So I'm not going to talk about hero placements because you've been looking at the screen for a little bit. So yeah, let's go to it. So Balfagor and Scarlet, they're Evo 2 and Evo 3. Having them high for this battle is going to help a lot. And I think we all get Balfagor. I'm not entirely sure. I think we all get Balfagor. So having a second fire range attacker, hopefully you have one. Hopefully it's Scarlet. So I start off by using Victoria. She's going to not take too much damage from these. And I faced her right. I think in hindsight I could have made her face straight up, because Li Zhen is not going to actually block anything. That would have been slightly better. But Scarlet on that frost tile is going to do a great job of covering the inside layer. You can see the enemies are coming around on an inside loop and an outside loop. That inside loop Scarlet just pretty much does by herself. So that's why Victoria wasn't really necessary to face Li Zhen and be all like that. Anyway, I'm setting up on the right hand side too. I've put Balfour on the Frost tile. Very similar idea that's going to be happening over here. Balfour is going to do a lot of the work, and then I've got a defender with a melee attacker behind. Having the defender in front, very useful in this because it's going to, these enemies hit hard. So having a defender that's going to survive a lot better. So I didn't bother trying to heal up Victoria. Instead, I just sold her and replaced her with a fresh new hero, which is now facing up. And then I've put down a healer for good measure. But we're mostly killing off the enemies before they're actually getting to my heroes, which is probably because I'm a bit over-leveled and using fire heroes. But, hopefully whatever setup you use can do something similar. Like I said, Scarlet and Balfour MVPs. You can see Balfour's really doing a lot of work on these enemies before they even get to my other heroes. The Frost tile really very helpful because Balfour has the bouncing on his attacks, which means he hits multiple enemies, so they all get slowed. Scarlet's AoE skill wrecks those enemies very nicely, and now we just got a few last big enemies on the right hand side, and that's this level done. So relatively tricky if you don't have the right heroes, probably. But if you have some good fire heroes, should be very doable. Looking at Special 5, this is one that had me stumped for a bit. I had to come back to it when I had strong water heroes and came up with the setup. So I wouldn't be surprised if you struggle with this. The enemies just hit really hard. And from this screenshot, you can see kind of what's going on here. Is I created a kill zone in the middle. I didn't use the frost tiles as you'd maybe expect to use them, which is because the enemies come in on the top and the bottom and they go along and then they go to the sort of opposite side of the central row, if that makes sense. I hope it did. And yeah, so they come along there, they go on that. They take quite a while to walk that path, and because they're enraged, they're slowly losing their health, so it's best to kill them later on their path, i.e. in the middle. And what you have is a frost tile on the bottom and the top. You can't really see, but Arctis is on the top one. And what you can do is have that facing, say, Silver at the bottom. Say we faced her to the right, and so she hits all the enemies that go along the bottom row and slows them all down so they take more damage to their enrage. It could work out very nicely, but what I found was actually it wasn't so useful because Silver would only hit one enemy that's going along there, and so if you've got 3 or 4 enemies coming along, she's only going to be hitting the front enemy, and then so she slows that one down a bit, hurts it a bit, and then the other one sort of goes in front and she hits that one a bit and stuff, and it's 4 enemies came through, she only actually slowed and dealt damage to say 2 of them. So in terms of helping out with the overall battle getting done, I found it wasn't particularly useful utilising the frost tiles like that. I much rather just had them in the middle facing inwards where they're going to be attacking all the enemies much more effectively, and they also do help a bit there because they do slow down the enemies just as they're coming in, which means that melee attackers can hit them while they're being slow, so they can hit them more before the enemies start hitting them. So I think the slow's more crucial at that point. Anyway, that's a long ramble to basically talk about frost tiles in general, which may come into play in other levels too, that perhaps you wouldn't use them in the most logical way when you first look at the map. Perhaps they're better used in the way in which I'm doing them here. You can also see that all my heroes are water. I had to go with the element advantage here. My Roland's Evo 3, and otherwise my heroes are just a bit stronger, I think. So we start off, we've got a fair bit of time because the enemies have to take a while to come round. So I put down Silver, I put down Roland. As you can probably imagine, if you didn't know by now, Roland's my favourite hero and he's just MVP here. So the enemies, they're down to half health by the time they get to the middle, those big ones, which makes them a lot easier to kill off. Also put down Arctis utilising the other frost tile, so they're just going to help slow things down in the middle for Roland to kill off. I put down Brunor. I think he actually does very little work throughout this entire battle. But yeah, the setup which I had put down before of the 3 heroes, the slowing them down and then having Roland kill them, is the ideal thing for doing this. So Roland was getting hit a bit. So I put a hail down in front of him, and you can see he's killing things before they get close to Brunor. Yeah, Roland is amazing for this, I guess. That's probably the main big take from it. I put a healer down for there, put another range attacker, and we're actually at our final setup. I didn't mention, I guess, Chandra. So she's going to hit things before they get to Roland as well, which will be useful. And we just got to hope that everything can can die off here. Those big enemies, oh, that's the thing I should have said. Those big enemies, this is the map where they hit really hard. They are like a big problem. So you've definitely got to try and kill them before they get to your heroes. Like I said, they lose a lot of health before they get to the central section, but saving your skills for them is going to be crucial. So you'll see I use skills on them as they come in. Hale, look at his health there. He got hit a little bit by them and he nearly died. And that is like, you know, he's a water hero against fire enemies. So yeah, it gives you an example of how much damage they do, which is where I had the problem with this battle. Also, these enemies, like, they hit past defenders and stuff, so it can just mess you up really badly. But that's Special 5. Now we've got Special 6. For similar reasons, this is quite tricky. We've got 3 different rows to cover here, and the beginning bit, as is often the case with battles, is the hardest bit. The setup I use kind of relies on Roland. So if you don't have a high level Roland, which I feel like I've said that so many times in videos, just pray to get a Roland. No, you can use some nature heroes perhaps and like have a good time there. But yeah, we'll see at the beginning. It's slightly different to like what you're looking at here. So the bottom is the bit that's like not that tough. I only put down 2 heroes there. I did put Carl down. Carl kind of covers it really nicely. There's water enemies in this battle, if you hadn't guessed. So Carl will do a brilliant job. And then I've got Arctis there just because having a range attacker to support, it's on a frost tile, so it will do a better job than a range attacker normally would. The central section is the problem one, where you've got a lot of big guys that come through, and basically it's quite tough. So having Roland that's not on the top or the middle row, so he can attack both of them but not get hit by these enraged enemies that are going to hit hard, I found incredibly useful for this battle. Also Sagus is going to support a bit. Sagus doesn't quite do enough damage for this, I found, but it's useful. And the stun bit as well, the stun tower, you know what I mean. You can perhaps utilise that for when there are the tough enemies there. The technique I use for this isn't ideal. I'll mention it as it comes to it. It's quite funny, some of the things that happens. Yeah, so these are the level of my heroes. I've got Evo 2, Evo 3 for Carl and Roland. They're my main strong heroes, really. So we start with Remus and with Sagus as well. So these will do quite a bit of damage to Remus. It's not good at all, but yeah, we're going to use the same technique that I used for Melee 3, I think it was, where Sagus is going to chip down the enemies, and then Remus actually finishes them off, which gets me more CP than if Sagus was killing them. So now we've got a bunch of dogs. This is kind of the problem bit, where you've got those dogs coming along the top, as well as the enemies coming along the top row, while you have the enemies coming in from the top, because if you put something to try and cover them both, like one square above where I have my Roland, they'll get attacked and killed quite easily. Roland does an amazing job because he manages to hit those things while staying out of the way, and yeah, it just does a better job. So now we've got the big enemies coming along the middle. They're going to wreck Remus. Unfortunately, I used the skill on Roland and it knocked the enemy right next to my Remus, so Remus then got one shot. Yeah, that's the poor choice of Roland. I think I probably should have made him face left rather than right, so he didn't push enemies into my other heroes. We haven't mentioned the bottom at all. If you focus upon that at all, basically it's like some medium enemies that come through, and my Carl kind of deals with them. There's this massive group of big enemies that Roland's skill did a really good job on. However, it did knock them past my defender. But yeah, like I said, face Roland left, it probably works out a lot better. So yeah, that's that battle. Good luck with it. I hope it goes well, and I'll see you in a video soon.